come into the Zoom link so we can count you as a participant?
Lance, it looks like you've got one more over on the attendee side, and he is not promoting over to a panelist, but they are there and able to speak.
Can you see who it is? Oh, looks like Cookie. There, I see him. Can you hear me okay, Cookie?
Yes, I can.
Great. It looks like we have quorum. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I think as we get started, I'll just do a quick introductions like we did last time, and I'll just kind of go down the list, and if you could just introduce yourself and say who you're with, and we'll move forward. So first off, I just want to thank, there's a lot of behind the scenes staff here at PAG that are helping facilitate this, and so I just want to put a thank you out to Crystal and Dawn and Brian and Jeff. Thank you guys for keeping me on track. I'm Lance Peterson, Project Implementation Administrator for PAG. And with that, I'll ask, let's see, Jeremy, looks like you're first on my list if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Jeremy Moore, ADOT.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for being here. Robert, I appreciate you being here too again. If you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah, Robert Bush with the Department of Transportation, GIS section.
Thanks, Robert. Todd?
Morning, everyone. Todd Kessler, City of Tucson.
Thanks, Todd. Jose Rodriguez.
Jose Rodriguez, Town of Oro Valley.
And we could get the other, get your gentleman with you.
Thanks. Mark Navarro, Town of Oro Valley.
Walter Jackson, Town of Old Valley.
Thank you all for being here. Paul?
Hi, everybody. Paul Casertano, Pima County DOT.
Michelle?
Michelle Montanino, Pima County DOT.
And Cookie?
Cookie, Street Superintendent, Town of Sahuarita.
Great. Well, I appreciate you all being here. So our next is our in-kind reporting. So I'd ask that if anybody is being paid with federal money that you'd let us know. Great. So that brings us to the meat and potatoes of this morning. So discussion on the collection of regional pavement data. Last time, Robert kind of explained that ADOT is currently collecting the required data for the national highway system and federal aid roadways. He's on board again if there's any additional questions from what he shared with us last time. But we have a few options to consider as a region what we'd like to see happen going forward with our data collection. And one would just to be utilize the data that's currently being collected by ADOT, since that meets the federal requirements. Option two is to contract pavement data collection services to supplement that data that's being collected by ADOT. And we would collect only the national highway system roadways and federal aid eligible roadways in conjunction with what ADOT's collecting to give us a more complete picture of our jurisdictional roadways. And what we would be looking at doing would be doing that every 3 years. And we'd have a variety of formats that it could be presented to you in. So Cartograph, Street Saver. If there's something else, we could work on having that presented into what the local jurisdictions are after. And along those lines, and I don't know, we'll have a lot of discussion here in a moment. I'm just kind of going through all the ABCs. So, and part C of this is having a cooperative purchase agreement so that you local jurisdictions, if you wanted to do some additional asset management or local roadways, could be contracted with this contractor to take care of that for you as well. But that would be something that would be done separately through the local jurisdictions as part of our contract, but again, paid for by the local jurisdictions. So those are kind of our options. So I'd like to just open it up for discussion and hear what you guys are thinking.
Hey, Lance.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to let everybody know, ICC, our vendor this year, has already been doing a bang up job, and they're expecting to leave the state or at least conclude their collection for ADOT by about July 4th, unless something unexpected comes up or weather or equipment problems, whatever, but they're on pace to wrap it up in about the next 2 weeks.
Great. You guys are awful quiet.
Robert, can you remind us? So ADOT collects a sample set in order to satisfy the federal requirements for interstate, non-interstate NHS. What additional routes does ADOT collect for the purposes of better understanding pavement condition and putting together your pavement rehab program?
As far as what we collect, I can tell you we collect the entire state highway system.
Right.
It's all your interstate, state route, US routes, business routes, alt, temps, wise, truck, all that stuff. In addition to that, we collect all national highway roads that are not considered on the state highway system. Bell Road, I think Tucson's got 2 or 3 also that are, I don't know if it's Speedway or Broadway, maybe a couple of 1 or 2 of those might be. And then the last thing we collect are all the sample panels derived from the HPMS decision process. And that is, to me, a black box. They put in your AADT, functional classification, and a lot of other minutia, and they spit back at us, these are the roads that we want collected as sample panels to satisfy HPMS needs. Now, the big difference is on the state highway system, we collect in both directions. Regardless if it's divided highway or not, we still collect in both directions of travel. On the national highway system and HPMS sample panels, we only collect what we would, there's no mileposts, but in essence of the cardinality of the route, which normally is from west to east and from south to north. So we only collect in one direction on NHS and HPMS sample panels. Additionally, if it matters to you or not, this year we had ICC collect, in addition to the mainline state highway system, they're also collecting all ramps, frontage roads, crossovers, cross-unders, all your grade separations, everything like that, that ADOT owns in addition to the main line.
So it sounds like the sample panel collection is really something that ADOT is doing in order to fulfill that HPMS requirement, but it's not really a value added for you when you're putting together your pavement rehab program.
I don't believe so, no, just because most of the HPMS sample panels off the state highway system, our pavement team doesn't manage or regulate.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of differentiate a little bit as we're talking about our program. You know, originally, I think it was designed to assist the asset owning agencies in the PAG region to give them the data they needed to put together their pavement rehab programs. In doing that, there was, assurances that that would also include fulfilling the HPMS requirements. But I think the original purpose, from my recollection, was all of the PAG member agencies collectively saying, yes, let's have a regional program. Yes, let's collect the federal aid network data so that we can use it to put together our pavement rehab programs. And so I just want to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of focusing too exclusively on supplementing what ADOT is doing on the HPMS requirement side, so that we just stop our program there. I think the real value is providing the asset owning agency PAG members with the data they need to put together a rehab program for the assets that they own.
Yeah, Paul, this is Jeremy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. I mean, when we look at our pavement rehab program, and we've got different sub programs, that we have here, and it's not all based on what Robert comes up with on his data. I mean, a lot of it is our maintenance guys, the district, going out and actually just putting eyes on the roadway. When we'll do site visits and stuff like that. And once we've identified where we feel that there's a need for some of this pavement rehab, it goes through a review process where we will rank it in terms of our greatest to least, on what we feel needs to be fixed. And then it goes through roadway and pavement design as well. And those technical groups will look at it, go out there and take an observation, and they will rank it. If we've got data, that Robert, has come up with, it's always good to have, but it's not solely based on that, so I just wanted to make sure that I think I would agree it's not solely based on that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The other thing, just to remind you, Paul, is that collection, with the exception of the ramps, frontage roads, and crossovers, cross-unders, is done on an annual basis. So those HPMS panels are done each and every year. I know you guys were talking about a 3-year cycle potentially on what you want done, but our data collection is done annually.
Does that include the entirety of the state roadways or
Yeah.
just the panels?
No, everything.
Everything.
The state highway system main line, the national highway system, and the HPMS sample panels. It usually comes in, just off the top of my head, to around a little over 14,000 miles of collection each year.
Okay. And Robert, you guys are collecting, I mean, you got the IRI data, you're getting all the pavement distress data as well in there, right? And those.
Yeah, we're collecting the IRI, faulting, cracking, rutting. I don't think there's anything else. I'm not a pavement specialist as opposed to the photo log and stuff like that, which I am familiar with. But yeah, we're collecting all necessary pavement data, as Jeremy said, to help those that review the roadway and stuff like that. It's another tool in their toolbox to review the roadway using those values and stuff like that. I know other things that they look at is, you know, how long has it been since a treatment's done? What kind of treatment was done? You know, flush coat, microsurface, stuff like that. So the condition, how long since the last treatment was done, or how long it's been since the pavement was put down. It's quite a number of things that factor into when do we want to do something and what do we want to do.
So Rob, my notes from last session are showing you've got about 15,800 linear miles or so. And
yeah, that
your price annually is just shy of $1 million or so. Is that
yeah,
right?
that's right. And that the higher mileage is because the ramps, frontage roads, and interchanges this year.
Gotcha.
That added around 1,800 miles total to the collection. And on each one of those, we're also only collecting the crossovers and cross-unders. I believe we're collecting in both directions. Ramps, we're only collecting in the direction of travel. And then frontage roads, we're only collecting in the cardinality on the side that it's on. I know in Tucson, they've got some bi-directional frontage roads, but if it's on the eastbound side, we're only collecting the eastbound direction of frontage road, even if it's bi-directional.
So I don't know, not to hijack the meeting necessarily, but I think that's maybe an important decision point for us to discuss, Lance, is like, does it still make sense from the practitioner's perspective to do the comprehensive collection of all roadways, pavement conditions that are either eligible for the funding that we're using, or B, look at a mechanism by which we can collect all of our own roadways through either separate contract or contribution business model, similar to like ortho photos, where with ortho photos, the partner agencies pitch in for the comprehensive collection of ortho photography products. And then the whole product set is collected, and products are developed for land use, land classification, and other pieces that are then distributed and made available to the partner agencies that contribute. So I guess I want to hear from others in terms of whether it makes sense from your perspective to try to do a full network collection, whether that should be, federal aid network, whether we should look beyond that. And then the frequency issue certainly is one that I'm not quite sure where we should be on a annual or 3-year rotation, or how we should deal with that stuff.
Hey, Paul, this is Jeremy again. I know the last time we were having these meetings, I think it was a while back before they came to a halt. You know, one of the things we were talking about was somehow maybe looking at if there's IGA possibilities to kind of piggyback on ADOT's testing, right? Because we've got, you know, we do our testing, you know, on our system, but if there's additional testing that the locals want to do, somehow create that IGA, figure out how it's going to be funded, and that way when they're down here doing the work, they're already down here. They can just piggyback on the additional lane miles. I think that was one thing we were taking a look at doing. I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah.
that can still be an option. And then for the stuff that's not on the system and the locals want to, you know, expand that, you know, I think that would have to be something that would have to be more internal on, you know, how you fund that, you know, what your process is. There some kind of a standard work, you know, and then maybe you take all those different thoughts from each of the different locals and come together and try to find one standard practice on how you address the stuff that's not on the system.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, we did try, we talked with your ADOT procurement folks about trying to do something similar to that, and under the current contract, that's just not allowed. There was no room for us to piggyback on what your contract, the current one.
Was that and I know I can't remember, but I think that one contract was due to expire, and then we picked up a new contract. I mean, is it different now that we've got a new contract, or?
No, it's the same. We had Fugro was our first vendor from 2017 through 2021. ICC is our new vendor through 2022 through potentially 2026, I guess. This is with ICC. When Lance reached out to us to looking to see whether or not we could get an IGA going, that was through our current vendor, ICC. And it's not ICC. It's unfortunately the way the contract is written when it hit the street and everything prohibits us from doing an IGA on it.
And I know there's, you know, local agencies that have their own contracts, including Pima County. And I think there's other agencies out there that are doing contracts. So, you know, it would be nice, but maybe it's not a game stopper necessarily if we can't get onto the ADOT contract.
Well, it sounds like it's a procurement issue then, right? That's Robert, it's strictly procurement.
Yeah, I was told that the way the contract was written, it in essence prohibits doing an IGA with other government entities.
So I'm wondering if that can't be done, if we're happy with ICC, if everybody's happy and they're performing well. I mean, I wouldn't think there would be anything stopping, like, say, the city or the county or, you know, picking up a contract with those same guys and just coordinating the efforts as to when they're down here doing ADOT work, they just go ahead and have it scheduled to pick up, you know, the county or the city work or the town, you know. There could be an option to do that as well.
Yeah, and I think from PAG's perspective, it's something that we would need to either go out for bid if we were involved with this and select a contractor, or look at potentially, we want to use contract services, so we'd have to explore potentially like the county's contract if that's something that makes sense for us to piggyback on, or another local jurisdiction if they have a current contract. But so, I mean, what we were looking at now is if the desire is to supplement that ADOT data and then let the local jurisdictions kind of, if they want their locals done or asset management, be able to contract separately on that. The first step is, I guess, do we want to to seek the additional pavement collection, or do we want to just go with what ADOT has?
Hey, Lance, quick question for you, or Robert, who's actually paying for the data that's being collected outside the state highway system? In other words, in the county or in the city or in the town, somebody's paying for that, correct? Is that PAG or is that FHWA?
With the ICC data that you're asking about, we are paying for it. ADOT, that is, with matching. I don't know what the exact is, if it's 70-30 or 80-20 matching funds between federal and state funds.
Okay. So you guys were paying for that, right?
And I think, not sorry to bump, jump line here on you, Todd, but I think that's because ultimately it is a state mandate. It is a burden that falls on the state to fulfill the HPMS requirements. And then the state typically will ask the MPOs and the local agencies, hey, what can we get your data so we can fulfill the HPMS requirements? ADOT is just fulfilling it from the pavement perspective and compiling that data.
So the data that was being collected by the city of Tucson, where did that go? Did that go to Robert or directly to FHWA? And I know the city of Tucson was collecting data for us. The IRA, right? What else?
And
Distress data.
Yeah.
Did that get reported to the state? Or is that just for us?
No, I think Todd, you could probably answer that. I think it was going to the state and then the state was reporting that, right?
Yeah, the program's evolved right through the decades. Before state ADOT entered into this all-state collection model, we were feeding the data we collected regional up to ADOT, and really a contractor, as I understood it, would aggregate the data from the various jurisdictions and would use that to fulfill the federal HPMS reporting requirements. So we did that on behalf of the region, but as ADOT entered into these contracts, it ended up being we're really just collecting data for our regional pavement programs. We kind of kept that HPMS collection model, if you will, if ADOT fell away, or we're collecting those full extent NHS and federal aid eligible as the routes we collected. Some major streets, to say that simply. So it kind of changed to where we were fulfilling that as part of the region. And many of us will probably remember going to PAG trainings or PAG facilitated trainings on the other part of HPMS, where we'd use a website and report some of those other big, I think it was the big 6 or big 9, I forget the acronym there, to along with the IRI and the running data, there was some other attributes that we would fill in ADOT's website with. So it's evolved, but ultimately, yes, it made it up to the feds, right, through the state from our local supplements. So while I got the mic, if I just can chime in, I don't know if anybody would be opposed, but I think all the conversation leads to we'd all benefit from contract data collection services on as much roadway as we can get. That would be at least my recommendation. If local streets are not eligible for, collection of the local street data is just not allowed given the funding mechanisms, then certainly I would say the full extent, both directions on the rest of the major street routes for the jurisdictions, just to be able to assist, to Jeremy's point there, right, and to assist with pavement management type decisions and rehabilitation project lists. It would just be another feeder, but to be able to get those full extents, the sample sections from my perspective don't do anything. They're checking the federal box, right? We're reporting on that data, but it's really not helping. When we have a speedway broken up to how many different paving structures and segmentation, segments, and the samples not on all of those, I don't have any data for many of my pavement segments. So we'd want that full extent to see that. And oftentimes, especially median separated roadways, right, you got different conditions and situations on directional of travel. So I'd want to see both directions on that. The 3-year cycle, I think that, from just speaking from my perspective, would be sufficient for pavement management purposes. I mean, we can degrade those roads or make some predictive degradation of those conditions if we had that every 3 years. And I think Michelle brought it up in the last meeting. I think I asked a question about, are we not going to have a spend each year? But she said, well, it's nice to have all the data at the same time. Absolutely agree with that. After she made that statement, I think every 3 years, but it's all inclusive. Everything's on the same, general dates. And so you're comparing apples to apples is pretty important, as opposed to, I think that point's clear. Just to touch on the contract stuff, if there's no opportunity for procurement to revisit, and it's really ADOT's, right? Making amendments to the contract, then I really think we would benefit if the idea, Lance, Pag's perspective, you said, hey, let's supplement what ADOT collects. If that's the idea, we back to apples and apples, we'd want to use the same vendor. Otherwise, these vendors it's the same bolt-on technology many times, but their algorithms, their software, what they spit out can be different. And if we use a different vendor, but we're being asked to supplement with the ADOT data, I don't know how comparative. We might have different data columns and different data attributes. I would think we'd want to align with the state contract. Ideally, writing on that would be wonderful, right? Every time the state changes contractors, if this were to continue moving forward, it'd be great if we kind of moved with it as a region to where we're all talking the same language. And I guess not to get long-winded, I would throw that toward if PAG has to go out for bid, is unable to do a sole source in some type of angle like I just mentioned there, and actually goes out to bid, that we'd want to do that as a region. I would think that all our jurisdictions are using the same general contractor, so we can call up Walter or Mark and talk data in the same language and work together as a region, as opposed to if we independently go out to contract services, right? That could be compromise all of that. So I don't know if my ramblings went all left and right, but I'll shut up for a moment.
I do like to chime in. I can see that point of view with you got kind of following ADOT's path. If ICC, we would have to get some information on that vendor just to make sure they can deliver what each municipality needs, because I'm unfamiliar with this vendor. Just how they, collect the data. Do they work with Cartograph? Do they work with Street Paver, et cetera? Because it sounds like they're collecting different for ADOT. ADOT collects different information, and doesn't seem like you guys use Cartograph or any of those software. So I want to make sure that vendor is able to work with those softwares. So it'd be nice to get some information on that vendor to see who we're working with. And then the other thing I just like to add is kind of resetting, going back to the data City of Tucson was collecting. I know that you guys probably have those lane miles that you guys are collecting through each jurisdiction. It's kind of getting that information together and kind of going out for a bid with several other different vendors, just in case the ADOT thing doesn't work, and just kind of just get that basic collection that was happening, get that moving. And then if we want to add locals, do that later. But I think trying to grab it all at one time, I think we just need to get set to where we're collecting, exporting the data out, what it looks like, just for the basic collection City of Tucson was doing. And I think once we get that practice going, then we can add more stuff if everything works out fine. But just for the stuff that's already kind of being paid for by the PAG region, I think we need to focus on that and really get that data collected and get it back in our hands and see what that looks like.
Yep, and Walter, just so you know, these vendors are capable of producing in Cartograph, Street Saver, and they have a few other formats that they're capable of utilizing as well. Michelle, you've got your hands up.
So a couple of things from our recent data collection effort that we kind of stumble along through the process. One, we used RAS, which did an excellent job. There was a lot of discussion with them over changes from our old data to our new data. And when we went to upload, we learned about some of the, I guess, limitations of the Street Saver software, because it was set up using, or at least we're assuming the benefit or the premise of it was that it was set up before the sensors and the technology was in place to collect some of the more detailed block cracking, the alligator cracking, and differentiate that from all the longitudinal. And so we ran into problems with uploading the data because Street Saber had some background caps in there that said if it's longitudinal transverse cracking over this amount, it's automatically block cracking. Whereas the new technology can differentiate what's longitudinal and transverse versus block cracking. Those kinds of things, I think, and how those algorithms, like Todd was talking about in the background, how those algorithms break out the alligator, the block cracking, and the longitudinal can have a huge difference, I think, probably from one vendor to the next. And it also has a huge impact on your PCIs. So it goes back to needing to have that consistency in your data collection, that you have the same vendor, I think, collecting for your entire network.
Thanks, Michelle. Robert, you had your hand up. Did you want to contribute?
I did, but then I put it back down. I was confused for a moment. I was going to say that they were RIS was acquired by ICC, but I was mistaken. It's IMS that ICC acquired middle of last year and merged with and stuff like that. So that was all.
Jose, your hand's up.
That was actually Walter's hand.
That's
Oh,
my
Walter, your hand's up.
Yeah, and this is just me learning all the procurement and who you work with. Usually you got to do, 3 bids. You can't just have sole source. So would we be sole sourcing to a contractor to keep consistent data collection? So ICC would always be awarded data collection for this PAG region, or do we have to go out and get 3 bidders so we're not sole sourcing somebody? I don't understand how that works. So if somebody can educate me on that, I can get a little bit of understanding of what we're trying to do with as far as choosing that vendor to work with.
Well, would it come through PEG, Lance?
Yeah, and we had looked at the possibility of first, working with ADOT's contractor. We tried, and ADOT's procurement officer even tried to amend their contract to be able to allow us to use their contractor, and it just wasn't going to fly. So then the next question was the sole source, and that really isn't an option as well. We'd have to get FHWA, I guess, approval to sole source. And so our thought process is to put it out for bid, and or to contract with, if a local jurisdiction is currently, contracted with somebody, maybe looking to see if that's a piggyback option. So.
So I do have a question on sole source. I mean, because usually if you can justify why you're going to a particular vendor based on the needs of everybody at the table, you may be able to make a case. I don't know. But if we're bidding out every year or every 3 years, and each of those vendors have different processes, which does not create consistency unless they're able to adapt to what we want, then that kind of changes the game, because each vendor would have to say, here's our methods and practices. You have to come within these guardrails when bidding, and accept it. So, I mean, that's another way to get consistent data collection as well.
Well, let's ask a question for Robert. I mean, how are you guys doing with your vendors? Are you guys changing vendors every so often, or is it the same one, Robert?
Oh, you're muted, Robert.
Oh, thanks, Lance. Right now it's set up as a 5-year contract that we have the option each year to renew with the vendor up for 5 years. So this contract started in 2022. So unless something unexpected happens or quality degrades to the point of unacceptable, we'll be with ICC through calendar year 2026.
And was that contract established through a competitive bid process, or how was the contract established?
Yeah, it actually went out to the street. I believe there were 4 original bidders, but 2 of them did not meet the necessary. Procurement is very, how should I say, dark on how it handles things. They're not transparent. So, as a voting member on the committee that looked at it, we only ended up having 2 competitors to go through, and ICC won the contract. But it is open to bid to anybody that wants to. We've had previously in the 2017 contract, we had Australia, Europe, Canada. We had a number of international bidders bid on the contract. But for the 2022 collection cycle, we only had 4 bidders, but 2 of them were disqualified for whatever reason. They didn't submit something or provide the necessary information.
These vendors are not deemed as professionals, right, Lance? So you have to go low bid. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the
mean, we're
bids
not
that
basing
I've
on
seen, I think
qualification.
ADOT's bid, you guys had a pricing sheet. And I mean, there was multiple sections that you guys rated them on, right, Robert? But price was a component of it.
Actually, this goes back to the black box. They don't even share. Procurement doesn't share the price with us. That is done at the procurement level. They are the ones that look at the price and give it a weight in comparison to everything else. All we look at is the technical aspects and give them a grade on that. We do participate in providing the weight for each thing, the monetary, how much weight, is the monetary factor versus the technical skill versus all the other stuff. But when it was first done, we weren't even exposed to the numbers. We had no say whatsoever in the monetary side of it.
Well, and Jose, I've been looking at a few of the contracts, and they have a price component with them. So, looking at similar work, their team and responsiveness, all that kind of, on a percentage type, like we have evaluated other contracts.
But it's ultimately it's based on low bid then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the concern. Yeah. Any questions?
And it sounds like ideally the region would love to be able to utilize, ADOT's contractor, but, and I don't know if going forward, when you guys go back out for bid, if that's something that language could be modified, but in the meantime, it's kind of where we are.
But right now, ADOT's are collecting the data that's required by FHWA, right? So we're okay in that part.
Yep.
Yeah, we're meeting all your federal needs when it comes to reporting roadway condition.
And maybe Pima County can, I don't know if you guys used RAS, so have you looked at how their data actually, it would merge with what ADOT's provided, or?
I haven't done that comparison, no.
See if there's any concerns with, I spoke with both ICC and RAS, and it sounds like they're both capable of providing, the same data. But Todd, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Lam, just in that capacity, I don't know about the other jurisdictions, but as Robert alluded to, we just have like Valencia and Irvington going through the region here that we would have any data really to, besides sample sections, to merge. So I would think any contract, we would just have them run the full deal rather than, oh, there's a sample section, stop collecting, hop to the other side. You're just going to go. You're just going to go. So I don't know that the ADOT data is actually going to really, if we were to establish a full extent collection model here, contract, that it would really even factor in, quite honestly. I think it would just go over the whole route, except maybe Valencia and those certain routes. But even those, I think Robert said they're still only cardinal direction, right? So we want the other direction. I just assume you write the extra miles in and get it again. There'd just be a little overlap.
And from PAG's standpoint, we want to try to avoid, paying for data that's already being collected by ADOT. So wherever we're going to call out supplemental mileage, and if it's for the ease of the contractor is going to collect it all, and that would be something.
There's costs to the overhead of bringing the data together too, right?
True.
So
Not only that, but you have to look at the cost, kind of like something Todd was talking about. If you wanted to exclude all the sample panels, you in essence have to put a routing package together doing just that. So you got the man hours involved with that, putting all of that information together, as opposed to just saying, here's our network, collect it in both directions. We'll see you in 3 months. Thank you very much. So I agree with Todd. There's pros and cons going each way.
And your sample panels don't change typically, right? I mean,
yeah,
on the classification of the roadway, Robert, right?
It's few and far between that they change. As I said, if there's a significant change in AADT or a significant change in the quantity of functional class to an area, that may alter the sample panels that HPMS requires for an area, but it takes something significant to happen over a number of roadways to alter a particular area.
Paul, your hands up?
Yeah. So, it sounds like collectively everybody thinks that the value is in collecting as comprehensive as possible for the network, and the details of whether we collect over the ADOT sample panels just to get the right data and such, because it might not be of use for our purposes, seems like an issue we deal with, a little bit later in determining what the best course is. Does it make sense to turn it off and then turn it back on? Or does it just make sense to just run the route and recollect that data? So I'm not too terribly concerned with that, but what I'm hearing is like the value seems to be, let's look at options to collect as much as we can, as one regional party, so that we've got that consistency of data, we've got the consistency of frequency collection. And then I guess the next wrinkle becomes, sounds like I know from county's perspective, there's desire to go beyond the federal aid network and look at the local roadways and get the data needed there, or else we don't really know what we're fixing and how we're fixing it and what the condition is. So we have that interest for sure. And we can, talk further or later about what the right business model approach to that is. Personally, for me, what I've seen at the county is it makes sense for us to go out and collect the entire thing at once, rather than just do major streets and routes federal aid network and then do the local roadway network at a later time or something like that. That just provides difficulties in piecing those two data sets together and making it all make sense. So if there's an option there, I think we would want, as comprehensive as possible and as all the way down to the local roadway level, if possible as well. And I think we can figure out the contribution and the business model behind what funding is used for what. I'm not too terribly concerned about that, but I think that sounds like it would be of highest value for the purposes of the asset owning agencies. Get it on the right frequency, whether that's 3 years, and then make it all consistent across jurisdictions.
Robert, your hands up?
Yeah, something to think about. It's really too late to do it this year, but if you guys were to think about using ICC and get a package together before they come to the state, which next year probably will be in the same time frame, probably in late March is when they would anticipate start collection. And instead of going back and collecting those areas that they did not collect for us, what they could do is, if they already have your routing package and our routing package simultaneously, is just collect everything for you and then just pull out what we need for ADOT's purposes. As I said, it's too late to do it this year. They've already done the majority of sample panels and stuff like that and getting your package together. But potentially for next year, you know, give them your area as a primary and then just let them pull out with ADOT still paying. You know, we can definitely do the mathematics to find out through GIS, you know, we're paying for this, so we don't need to double pay. You guys pay for what we don't collect and we pay for what we collect, but for their collection process, that way they can drive University or Speedway as one continuous route, not a half-mile section here, 3 miles later, another half-mile section and stuff like that that ADOT needs. The advantage to that also is, unlike collecting ADOT collection and a collection separately for you guys, whether it's from ICC at a later time or a different vendor, all this stuff's going to be done at the same time. So when you're looking at a half-mile section here, it's not 5 months later that you're looking at next section down the road. You're going to look at everything within the same time, general time window. So just something to think about for next year. I don't know if you intended to do a collection this year, but I think with enough time ahead of us, which we do have, something hopefully could be put together that could allow ICC to collect your whole network sometime next year. And as I said, they'll just extract from that collection and bill ADOT for our particular HPMS sample panels.
You know, that does raise the question on where are we in the frequency? I know from the county's perspective, I don't think we are in dire need for collection next year because we just got our collection set this past year, this past fall. But I'd love to hear, you know, thoughts from the other agencies. Should we be looking to start up next year? Should we be more realistic and take a little bit of time and make sure that the right contracting and procurement mechanism is set up and we examine what the, you know, pooled fund approach should look like and then try to hit 2 years from now? Or what are your thoughts?
The other thing I just thought about, Paul, you bringing that up, if you were to put a package together for next year, that would be 2024. That means if you wanted it again in 3 years, it would be 2027.
Side of your...
The problem with that is if you were to do that, 2027 is likely going to be the first year under the next contract. And who knows whether or not it'll be ICC or another company. If ICC does become the company for the next contract, I would say it would go off pretty cleanly because we've already got each other's rhythm. We understand what both teams need and stuff like that. And it would be probably reasonably flawless to do such a thing. But if it's a new contractor that ADOT will be working with in 2027, the first year is always very painful with learning data dictionary, learning terminology, even the terminology. What we say is one thing, and even in, you know, ADOT and PAG and everything else, we might consider some term commonplace, but for the vendor, that means something somewhat different. So there's a very large learning curve that first year. So if you do collect next year and then want to collect 3 years from there, realize that's going to be the first year of a new contract that I can't foresee who will have, you know, at this time.
Thanks, Robert. Anybody have any additional thoughts on that, or what Todd and Paul both kind of, it sounds like the consensus is we're interested in getting as much data as we can. So looking at moving forward with data collection services for this pavement.
Yeah, we're on board as well too. There, Lance. We want to get as much data. I like that as well.
are we all, in agreement with the, 3-year frequency? Does that make sense from the local agency perspective?
That would be the maximum for us, 3 years.
Yeah, it works for us 3 years.
I mean, yeah, 3 years will work, but for 2, but 3 will work for us.
Yeah. And then is there a way for us to more clearly understand what the differentiation of costs would look like for federal aid network versus local roadways? Because I think there's interest in, I know from county for sure, and it sounds like there's interest from the other local agencies to get the local roadway data. And if the opportunity is there to get it all at once, I think that's the ideal. So whether that looks like, its own standalone TIP project as days of old, where it was regional pavement management as a TIP project, and then there's the federal STBG funding in there, and then there's local fund contribution from Oro Valley and Pima County and the city of Tucson that makes up, 20%, 40%, whatever the right number is. But that covers the entirety of the local roadway collection. Then we can just execute a contract that just gets out and collects everything at once, and then just distributes the data and makes it available to PAG and the local agencies. Those are details we don't really need to work through right here and right now, but I know that the collection of local roadway data is something that we're going to want to continue to do. And for us to do it as a wholly separate effort from a regional collection, we're going to have some conversations as to whether or not that makes sense from our perspective.
So Paul, do you think, so if we move forward with we'll look into contract this data collection. If we get a contractor on board and you guys are interested, it's like Pima County's interested in the locals, and I'm imagining the city of Tucson maybe as well, and Oro Valley and Marana and maybe Sahuarita as well. I know we're talking about doing them all at the same time. Do you see it as problematic if we leave that negotiation up with the local jurisdictions with the contractor? Because I was going to set up, as I go out for bid, have that as a potential add-on to the contract, for local roadways, asset management, and some of these have also, they provide they have software for budgetary assistance and looking at pavement management stuff. So all those were going to be kind of supplemental.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm open. I want to hear from others on this. From my, there's a lack of technical prowess here, but like for me, it makes sense to just do it all, collect everything you want during one session, and then make it all available, parse it out after that. So it's more of like a pooled fund model similar to orthophotography, where you wouldn't do separate contracts for flood control district wants a certain data set and the TO Nation wants another data product from an orthophoto collection. You just pool all the funds and you say, here's the data products we are all getting. And Oro Valley has contributed its amount because it wants the local roadway data. County has done the same, and then the vendor just gets out. But, the details of how the mechanism works and the contracting, I guess it's not all that critical as long as we can get those efficiencies to scale.
Yeah. And so, it sounds like, the main thing is, sorry.
Yeah, I'd be open to hearing others' thoughts on that, but that's the intent, I think, is just to not do it and then have to come back in and do the other part and then come back in and do the city section, and then the data becomes, well, this data set's from 24, but this data set's from 25, and the local roadway data we had to wait till 26, and then it gets kind of squirrely at that point.
Robert, you've had your hand up. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, that must have been left over from earlier. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Todd, you're up.
I started talking on mute. just going back a little bit, so I can't speak on behalf of the city, but from my perspective, we'd want this data as soon as we can feasibly acquire it. We're not getting any data now. I think that's true for the other jurisdictions, less the county. So spinning that up, just in terms of the collection frequency, what 3 years from my experience is sufficient for the asset management side of the house, but it may not be good contractually. To Robert's point there, we wouldn't want to straddle. Somehow we'd want to align those, whether it ends up being the same vendor or not. We might want to have the growing pains at the same time frames. And also, speaking of time, for the federal stuff, that collection's on calendar year, not fiscals. And when we start talking about all this money stuff, local contributions and things like that, right, fiscal years come into play. So we may have some issues to iron out there too. Where's the monies? Getting those monies set out and planned, but then the collection. I mean, if we go dump all the Eastern Pima County local roadways to ICC, that may challenge they may have to come back much sooner than March to be able to fulfill the federal requirements for even the state's extract. Details that maybe don't matter, but it just at this point. But I think we're gonna have to flesh that out a little bit, right? Timelines and then budgetary stuff. Having the opportunity in the contract language to contribute or not contribute, I think, is important. And then each jurisdiction will have to figure out whether they can do it.
Okay, so for the main portion today, I mean, I think we have a consensus that we're interested in moving forward with contracting additional pavement condition data. I don't know if we need a formal motion and a vote, I think would be good, just so that we're clear that everybody's in favor. I mean, we have 5-member jurisdictions here, so we have quorum, but I would like to have a few more to chime in, but.
Now, all of us in agreement. I think we need the data as soon as possible as well too, because we were depending on the city of Tucson to collect our materials and collectors, and I don't think that's been done for how long there? 19, I think. So it's been about 40 years or so. So it's been a while. So we need that data now. But we also want the option of working with a contractor to add our local streets. We also want those added as well too. But before we can commit to it, we need to know what that price tag looks like. Like everything else, we got to go through procurement and budgeting. But we are definitely interested in having one vendor do all the arterials and collectors with the option of adding the local streets afterwards. The other question for the group is that can we get a vendor that can actually do all the county, when I mean county, Pima County, which includes all the jurisdictions within the county, can they do them all at once in 1 year? Because that's a tall order. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
we're talking, that's a lot of streets.
Yeah. I don't know if one company's gonna be big enough to do all that.
Yeah, do we have a vendor with that capacity?
That van would be driving nonstop, like Todd knows. A lot of driving, a lot of data, a lot of manipulation.
Because we
people
have
to deal with.
many years back, we had a vendor that was collecting data for our signs. They believe it was collecting multiple jurisdictions, but by the time they gave us the data, that data was already outdated. I mean, they gave it to us, oh yeah, we collected. Well, how long ago was it? About a year and a half ago. Well, that's a little bit outdated now. So we need that. As soon as they collect the data, we need that data turned over to us as soon as possible. But
Just as feedback from ADOT side, last year the contract started later than we wish it would have been awarded, and ICC brought 3 vans to Arizona to make sure the work was done in time. This year they only brought 2 vehicles because they had much more time within the calendar year and everything like that to do it. But I know in talking to them from our side that they'll bring in as many vans as they need to get the job done in the time specified. Plus, I don't know if you, as I said earlier or not, that ICC acquired IMS, so that added to their fleet right there.
So for our data collection, we collected 1,900 miles. It was about 2 months of data collection with 2 vans. And one of the things that RAS did, because we did have a tight timeline on trying to get the data imported, is they were starting to process the data as they were running it. So they would get done, I don't know how frequently, but they would get done with, you know, some of the roads and start processing those roads while they continued to drive other roads. So that helped with some of that turnaround so that we were able to get the data out more quickly. Which I think is definitely a capability we would want if we're talking a regional wide effort.
And when you say data, are you talking the pavement data?
Yeah, the pavement data coming off of the sensors.
Yeah.
They would, I don't know how they were shipping it back, but they were shipping it back to the home office at a periodic rate. So they could start doing
I
that.
believe
in-house.
ICC does every 2 weeks. We're still, just as an FYI, this year, they started right at the end of March. We're still waiting on our first payment deliverable, but it's going to have 4,000 to 5,000 miles on it, because one of those reasons is because of ADOT. What ICC does is when they drive everything, the first deliverable they give us is a GIS deliverable, because we have the HPMS bins, the 1/10 of a mile bins that have to be filled across the whole state. So they send us a GIS deliverable approximately 3 weeks after collection in 2-week increments. And we go through it and approve it. And until it gets approved, they don't start working on the pavement data. So that's a little lag time that's added, but that's at ADOT's necessity, not the vendors. The other thing, just to throw out to you, if you knew or not, ICC is doing something that ADOT has never done before, and that is they are producing the photo log and uploading it every 2 weeks. In all the years that we've collected photo log, it's always been an annual delivery of the entire system. Here it is, here's 2021 in its entirety, all available at one time. With ICC now going to the cloud, we literally have access to imagery that's less than 2 weeks old. Now, the limitations to that are, no, we don't have the pavement data, and we don't have a lot of the metadata associated with it, but we do have the imagery if that's of importance to you, especially for asset collection or validation.
Great. Any other thoughts or concerns from the group? So I'm not seeing any. It sounds, again, like the consensus is we're interested in moving forward with some additional contracted pavement services. So if we're at a point where someone's comfortable in making a motion, and we could maybe get a second and vote with our 5 jurisdictions to see if we have quorum, if we can get a majority.
Hey, Les, what are these the only 2 options?
Well, the 2 options are we don't do anything and allow and use the ADOT data, you know, that ADOT's already providing. And the second would be for us for PAG to contract supplemental payment collection data from, we'll just leave it as contracted, because I mean, I know it sounds from the group, ideally we'd love to be able to use the same vendor or contractor that ADOT's using, but it sounds like we're either going to have to go out for bid or potentially utilize an existing contract that the local jurisdiction's using. And along those lines, there'd be the ability like we have discussed, collecting the local data, local roadway data, asset inventories, but the main point now is if we're interested in moving forward with additional pavement data collection, with the understanding, of course, and it sounds like the frequency of 3 years was adequate. And it sounds like we'd rather not wait, for a year or two. We'd rather get the data as soon as possible for the jurisdictions. And again, what ADOT is looking at currently providing would be the federal aid eligible roadways and major roadways, the national highway system, to supplement what ADOT's doing. And I think, Robert, you had a good point. We drive it all, and if we could pull out ADOT stuff, that makes it really easy. So, but that'll be up to whoever is the selected vendor or contractor for the work. But as a region, is that something that
I was
sounds
just gonna add to
reasonable?
it. The other thing I thought about was if you put something together for them to collect next year in 2024, maybe, I don't know if it's financially sound or not, you might collect again in 2026, 2 years later. That way, when you need a 3-year collection from 2026, it'll be in our 3rd year of our next 5-year contract, where obviously it would go a lot smoother. Not saying it can't be done in 2024 and 2027, but if you piggyback with ADOT's vendor, maybe not the contract, but the vendor itself, 2027 is going to be a busy year, especially if ICC does not continue to be the vendor of choice for ADOT. Just wanted to let you think about that.
Nope, that's true. Any other thoughts or discussions, or? Todd, your hand's up.
Yeah, so leaving obviously lots of details to iron out, but I don't know if this would be appropriate, but I'd like to make a motion for PAG to seek the approval to use the funds for contract data collection services for the Eastern Pima County region, for the PAG region.
I guess Todd, is that for additional data, correct?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to keep it really general because we got to iron out the frequency and the details. So I think one step would just be to pursue the getting the funds earmarked for it, and I think there's some approvals, Lance, and this, I don't normally make motions here, but Lance, you probably have some other bodies you got to take this up from the PAG hierarchy. So I just would think we're in agreement to move toward regional data collection services. I wouldn't even want to pull out the ADOT specifics. I think we can figure, the sample sections. We'll just figure that out. We're gonna have to come together on what data are we collecting, what are the requirements, what are the frequencies, having riders for local streets. So at this stage, I think it's just appropriate to say move toward the it's option 3, pavement data collection services for Eastern Pima County.
Yeah, and along those lines, Todd, I know you have the motion, but so again, it's what PAG is looking at is supplementing ADOT's roadway collection. So federal aid and national highway roadways. We were thinking 3-year collection. I think that we can still discuss that if there's some questions regarding that. But like I said, the main thing is for us to come to consensus that we're interested in, as a region, getting that additional pavement data collection with those stipulations that the major roadways are going to be collected.
And Lance, just
Jose.
So we're going to continue collecting the same data that City of Tucson was collecting a couple of years ago, correct?
Correct.
Except it might be through a vendor this time.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll be contracting it with a vendor.
Okay, now that it's clear, yeah, I'll second that motion.
And if there's any questions or anybody's unsure, we got a little time to make sure everybody's comfortable. But we have a motion, we have a second, so I'd like to go ahead and take a
You know,
vote.
I'd like to maybe offer a friendly amendment if Todd would be up for that, just so that we don't limit it to Eastern Pima County. I want to make sure that we at least have the opportunity to collect Pima County owned roadways that are not in Eastern Pima County. Whether and how we get to those details, we'll have to figure all that out, of course. But like, I don't want to be all over the place, but I don't want to say, well, we just said Eastern Pima County, so we can't involve the TO Nation. We can't do anything for ADOT on the western portion of Pima County, and we can't collect any Pima County owned roadways outside of Eastern Pima County. So if you're amenable to that, I just want to
Yep,
say
that
Pima County.
sounds good. I agree.
Oh, Jeremy, your hands up.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I mean, have we ironed out the costs, like how this is going to be funded? Or I know Paul had made a comment about, you know, possibly having a line item in the tip, and I mean, have we ironed that out? Do we know what direction we're going with that? Or
Well, this first portion is just to gauge the interest, to have an interest in moving forward with that contracted data.
I'm just wondering what the motion was for. Like, I'm just wondering if we should have more of a defined scope, exactly what, you know, how the funding's going to look, you know, exactly defining the limits. I'm just wondering if that scope should be more defined before a motion. I don't know. Just a thought.
I think it'll have to be. I don't know. Can we get there now, or is this just a consensus support for the concept of contracting services for the collection of major streets and routes data throughout Pima County?
I'm just wondering if we're making a motion,
figure out the details of what does that mean and how does it look and what are the collection specifics and things like that.
right? Because if we're making a motion, I guess who are we approving or bumping this up to? What's the next level? Like, does it need to go to another level? Or because if it does, I would think that if this group is making a motion to approve it and it's going to the next level, whatever that group is, they're probably going to ask questions, and they're probably going to want some background information on, you know, again, the funding, has the group thought about it, you know, the limits, all of that kind of stuff, what roadways specifically, like, you know, Paul was saying, let's not limit to one area of Pima County, you know, someone's going to probably ask those questions. I'm just wondering if we should have those answers before we go to that group, but it's just a thought.
I think my understanding with this motion is that to ask PAG to move forward and seek maybe more information on a potential vendor to collect this additional data that was already being collected by the city of Tucson. And I don't know exactly how much the city of Tucson or how much PAG was paying the city of Tucson to collect the data in the past. Can we still use those same funds, Lance?
There is
paid for the van. I mean, PAG paid for the van, paid also so much money each year as part of the overall work program to the city of Tucson. Can we still use those same funds, or those funds, did they go away? Or are they still available?
well, and the funds, my understanding is, of course, there's a cap on the funds. So if we collect the data, we have those funds to charge against. If we don't, we don't have. I mean, the fund's not just sitting there. It's a drawdown, is my understanding, for us to do this.
That's part
So
of
the main point for us at this point was, are we interested in moving forward and seeking contracted services? Working out, I mean, my understanding is all of the PAG region and all the local jurisdictions would, you know, we would be collecting the data in all those.
Correct.
But also with the realization that the local roadways were something that would not be funded by PAG. That would be something that would, and that's a different, I think, you know, Paul had mentioned some ideas on how like the ortho photos are done, and maybe that's something we can look at on a future meeting. But I know, you know, Jeremy, you talked about taking this recommendation forward, and I know a few of you are going to be in the TPC meeting tomorrow, and I know there'll be an update kind of on what our recommendation is moving forward tomorrow. I'll share with the group tomorrow morning, but ultimately my understanding is the recommendation from this task force is what we're proposing to do. So.
Right.
You know, I think we also need to follow the eligibility of the funding, not necessarily say that it's limited to federal aid network. If I don't think that the STBG funding is eligible for collection of local roadway data, but I sure would like to take a look. Like if that is eligible and all of the PAG member agencies say, hey, that would be great if we can use still just a portion of the funding that was used for the collection through the city of Tucson, and we can get everything because it's eligible for use of this funding. I think we'd all be interested in that. So I think we need to explore all options for sure. And if we need to contribute local funding, we'll look at that option as well.
That's a good possibility, Paul, but my recollection is that if it's not in the federal aid, it's not eligible.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just, I'd like to verify.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with taking a peek and seeing if it is possible or not. But we are understand that the local roads will have, if we want the local roads added to, let's say, to the project, the town would have to pay for that.
Yeah, I think everybody is in agreement with that conceptually.
We're looking at economy of scale. We're saying, yeah, if everybody jumps in, I think it's good for everybody. Be less expensive.
Jeremy, your hand's still up. Do you have some more?
Oh, my bad. I forgot to take it down. Sorry about that.
So, are we comfortable in moving on the motion that was presented, or?
Todd, you want to say it one more time?
I don't know if I can.
I mean, I know we have the consensus, and
I mean, yeah, to Jeremy's points, right? All those details, we hard to say the costs if we haven't defined what we're collecting, and hard to say the costs if we don't know the vendor, because vendors will have to bid and all of that stuff. So that'll have to be defined. So understanding the scope has to be defined. Simply, I guess the motion is, we're looking at a couple of options on the screen. Motion is just to move forward with a regional data collection services for Pima County roadways.
And I second that motion. Yep.
great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any against? Great. So it sounds like we had a unanimous agreement for moving forward to look at some contract data. So,
And, Lance, while we didn't really mention it in the motion, I think the expectation is all of those details of, what data and frequency and all that stuff is something that comes through this group. And I think everybody's interested in providing you that support.
great.
We just don't want it to be, we went out and we established a contract and wait, what? So,
Yeah. No, I look forward to working with the group and moving forward on this and making sure we get what we want as a region. So.
No, I think the understanding is that the PAG will go out there and look at, well, who's out there, what vendors are out there, and then later on we'll fine tune the scope.
yeah, I remember when we did the van acquisition, we had a subgroup, to put together those specifications and the whole bit. And then that was brought back through the larger pavement task force saying that the subgroup developed the specifications and the scope of work. And we're ready to release a request for, proposals for new van acquisition. And so there were lots of detailed things that went into those kind of efforts.
No, I appreciate you all being here this morning and working through this. So, and Robert, thanks again for your expertise and making yourself available.
Yeah, let me know if you need my time or help on anything else, and we'll make it happen for you.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you and Jeremy and everybody being here. And we were able to make a recommendation and move forward. So that's good. a lot of you will get the update tomorrow that we're going to move forward with contract services at TPC. So
Great.
I think with that we can adjourn, and I'll just let you know that I'll what do you guys think real quick on a follow-up meeting in a month, next month? Interested in just talking about moving forward on the contract process.
Within a month, it was reasonable.
I will look to set something up in July.
Yeah, and you know, Lance, in preparation for that, if you need to collect, you know, whatever the scopes look like from ADOT and from county and others, it might be good to try to narrow in what the data specifications should look like so that we can maybe start looking at those and have a fruitful conversation on these look right. We don't see this type of data product in there. We want to make sure that we get it, you know, just to move us as far along as possible with each meeting.
Nope, that sounds great. And so, yeah, I will work on that, and you guys may see an email from me before then, just if I have some stuff to share. So again, thanks everyone for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks everyone. We'll see some of you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you.